transition to okay, so we're recording. Okay. Um, let's transition to building and joining coalitions. Some background on what a coalition is. So essentially, it's a group of individuals within an organization working together for a common goal. And I think what is key about coalition and why I chose this as a medium for you all is because I think as we engage with people in the community that we are trying to reach out to, if we're all able to collectively work together toward a common goal, we're able to build members within the coalition that are stronger and that have a deep bond to the message and what we're trying to resonate and get across. We have to also amass power necessary to do something that you cannot do through a single individual. So the power behind a coalition is that it's strength in numbers. It's being able to engage with a large population of individuals and march toward a common goal. And it's building a group of people that have a shared interest or a shared philosophy about what your overall message is trying to convey. So the goal is to build a powerful base of supporters. And we heard just in the introductions from folks here that have built coalitions and who have, done them around concepts that are tricky, like alcohol and drug prevention, mental health, not vaping, strategies for living a healthier lifestyle, well-being, all of these, all of these concepts, which society is really not necessarily comfortable talking about. I think more and more we are becoming more open and more transparent as a society about just talking about these difficult topics. And I think as we continue to build more and more awareness through coalitions and finding people within the communities that we work in and that we reside, will ultimately lead to better outcomes, and it will lead to a society that's more interconnected and that we're all able to learn and grow from one another. And I've I see this within my own organization. We have this concept of a blue dot, which is essentially where you are part of a group that you have gone through a information session essentially on mental health. And so you are able to be a person that somebody within the organization or the community can come talk to about mental health, whether it's something that you're struggling with personally, or you are looking for advice for somebody that you basically get a badge on your like internal employee profile that shows that you are an individual that someone can reach out to and talk to. This is just like one example of how we can activate a coalition of people, and there's probably 500 employees across the company that are kind of this individual that can be someone that people can go to just talk about mental health in the workplace, talk about mental health, that things that their people are struggling with, and just be a listening agent for them. So this is like a small example of a coalition that I've seen work really well, where it's very lightweight, it's very low lift in terms of implementing, but something that you all can bring back to your organization and consider doing as well. I think it's just kind of like a nice to have thing for people. So again, we'll talk more and more about some of these cool ideas as we go on, but thought I would share that personal example. So some advantages of building the coalition, and for folks that have gone through this, they have some familiarity. You are able to win or understand what couldn't be done alone. and or with just a smaller group. It's really, again, building a solid power base that is ongoing and that allows you to activate as needed throughout the time that you're working together. You're also able to increase impact of the organization's or entity's efforts through having a strong coalition of people who are passionate and who are interested in the topic. You're also able to develop new leaders, and this is also a kind of an unintended or not stated benefit of a coalition, whereby you can have leaders start to emerge and form from the coalition. So like you may start it out, and you may then get individuals involved that have varying levels of interest or varying levels of perspective that they would like to share with the group. You can, with the coalition, it really ranges from, you can have people who are over involved, and you can have people who are just more passive. But it also may provide an opportunity for new leadership to emerge in the space, and or within the community, people that you may not have even had an opportunity to work with or connect with before, to develop new leaders. Also, again, you're broadening the scope and you're increasing resources as well, because you have more power behind what you're trying to share. Some disadvantages: it can distract from other work. Often, if coalitions are done well, it does take significant time commitment to be able to do well. It really does take engagement from you as the person putting it on, or a group of individuals and leaders. Like, it really requires quite a bit of work to get off the ground and to do well. And again, anyone who has experience doing this knows it is quite challenging, and we'll talk about like recruitment and how to build a strong coalition. But again, it does take significant time investment, and even more so in a virtual environment, because you're having to connect with people essentially where they are, versus being able to do it in person, where it was perhaps not easier in person, but certainly it was more so people coming to you versus you going to them in a more proactive and targeted way, especially through online social media engagement. Often we find that weak members can't deliver. So it really does take a special person to be able to form a powerful coalition. There's also compromises that do have to be made. There's also an inequality of power. So like I mentioned, there's usually a large range of power, from people who are passive to more engaged. So you have this spectrum, and often it leads to an inequality of power within the group itself. And then also individuals may not get credit. And what I mean by this is that it's sometimes hard to get noticed or recognized for being part of a coalition, because people don't always talk about it. They don't always share, or they're perhaps uncomfortable talking about it, or they don't know how to talk about it. And so people sometimes don't get credit for the work that they do with them, number one. Number two, they may find themselves kind of not being able to like share and talk about it in a way. And then also, like, how do we share with other people our own involvement in coalitions? I know that's something that, it's usually situational and context based. And then often it's a dull tactic, is what a lot of people say about coalitions, is that it's really dull. Like, there might be better ways to, reach masses and large people. And it can be again, like, very passive for some people who participate. But again, I think as we look at the importance of having coalitions, both from a community development perspective, but then also for sharing information about drug and alcohol prevention, and talking about these topics, I think it really does require a coalition. And I truly believe that the strength is often in numbers. And if people feel as if they're connected to something that's broader than themselves, which is often what a coalition entails, I think can really be a powerful group of people working together and building awareness. So some principles to ground us for successful coalitions as we begin to explore this further. Choosing a unifying issue is typically the best way to start a foundation for a successful coalition. So we've heard, like just even during the introductions, we had, mental health promotion and prevention strategies. We have, individuals providing wellness programs for employees around mental health and et cetera. So there's often a need with a coalition to pick a topic that is timely and relevant for what people are going through right now. We've seen increases with rise in, I would say maybe less so now, with mental health concerns as it relates to like isolation and people feeling lonely, which was certainly something that was experienced during the pandemic, and mental health professionals had to really work with patients to guide them through strategies for how to talk to people and connect. So certainly we have unifying issues that all of us are able to connect on some type of common ground. Another important thing is that we have neutral people working on coalitions. And what I mean by that is that they're not, we have people who are like not so far extreme one way or the other on these issues, but more who are neutral and that can take and listen to the perspectives and viewpoints of everyone. Often you can create a polarizing coalition where if you are kind of, I don't know how to say this in a way, but if you're like shoving information down people's throat, you will lose them in the process. And so it's important to remain neutral and unbiased when building and forming your coalition, and remaining relevant for everyone to feel welcome to participate. You also, and relatedly, have to understand and respect the self-interest of the individual and institution as well. And you have to ensure that the coalition mission and your unifying issue is tied back to your broader organizational mission or priorities. And this is, even internally at Google, we struggle with this, where we may spin up a coalition or a group and it's not connected to our mission or objectives or our priorities as a company. And so what happens then is that it doesn't get the necessary resources and funding to be able to successfully implement it. So what's really important is to connect back your unifying issue for your coalition to broader either departmental goals or broader organizational goals, to then link it to your overall strategy. And so as part of this workshop, I hope that we'll be able to start to think about how we can put some strategy behind a coalition and link it to a topical thing that you're all working through in your organization, to then bring back to your team to consider implementing as well. We also have to consider a budget, of course. There has to also be some level of agreement and disagreements as you're forming the coalition. And certainly it's not something that you can do alone either. You really have to be able to build a representative coalition with different individuals from different parts of the organization and also the community as well. And if some folks are working in a school context, being able to have students on the coalition to then be change agents within their local communities and with the people they interact with as well. So there's a lot there in terms of how we think about some principles. I also will say that we, again, contributions will vary. I've mentioned there has to be structured decision making as you're going through and facing different things. So you have to be able to ensure that you have whether it's a group of individuals or one or two people able to make decisions, because often some barriers are, tough challenges or circumstances come up, and then there's not a clear decision maker in terms of what we should do to move forward and how we should direct the group. So you need to have a platform for decision making to happen in a way that is advantageous to the coalition. And you have to achieve significant victories and set up milestones as well. So you have to celebrate the victories as you go on. And also you have to start somewhere. With a coalition, it's, you can have anywhere from, 2 people as you're starting out to then, 50 or 500 or 5,000. You have to start somewhere with it. And so it's important to achieve significant victories and also celebrate them as you go along, and then distribute credit fairly throughout as well. So some things to consider as you're thinking about setting up a coalition: will be temporary or permanent? Are we trying to address an issue today that we think maybe won't be around for too long, or is it something that we just want to bring together like a task force or a coalition of people to like work on some type of issue or propose a new strategy or a new policy, or to refine existing policies or programs? And so then it's a really temporary point in time thing, we're addressing it and we're moving on? Or is it something that we're going to make and intentionally invest in permanently, that we want to continue to build over the long term? And I think that will, depending on what you're trying to achieve with it, that's what would inform kind of what strategy you take in order to activate it. And then you have to consider what's behind the coalition. So again, what is the unifying issue or topic that the coalition will be focused on? That's not so broad that people wouldn't really understand, but it's not too specific where you're just focusing on one thing. Like, how can you make it both relevant, time bound, but also have an opportunity to expand and continue to grow in the future? And again, your organizational self-interest, this goes back to what I'm saying about connecting it to the broader strategy and the broader mission. How can members participate? This is super, super important for a coalition. You have to have different ways for the members to participate. Otherwise, it just becomes like you're joining the group and you're getting information pushed to you as a member. So this is like a lot of how I've seen, and I'm sure we're all familiar with like professional organizations, where often it can feel one-sided, where information like emails are just being pushed to you, and then there's really no participation or engagement as a member. You're just getting information pushed to you, or you're attending a conference, or you're kind of like this session, frankly, you're just you're having information shared in this form. But then how do you build participation with the members that that you have? Like, and it's important to consider that when you're framing the coalition, is like, how can you get people involved in it? How could you have change agents with this work? Because if you don't have that, then you don't have members that are engaged, and you don't have members that like really understand why they're there, and what they could gain from participation. So considering upfront how they can participate is super, super important to the overall strategy. And you may like, after you dig into it more, see, oh, there's really not, like, what are we asking people to do? Like, if there's no clear kind of thoughts around that, then the coalition likely will not be successful. And then again, how will participating in the coalition build your organization? So coming up with some um, almost success metrics up front in terms of how the participation in the coalition will build the organization and foster greater community contributions and commitment is super important to consider and to establish upfront for the longevity of the coalition. Because if not, and it's just a kind of one-sided participation, and there's really no building or benefit toward the organization, then likely it'll be hard to get resources put behind something that may not lead to any tangible benefit. And I will say too, it's often hard to quantify. And for folks who have worked on coalitions, it is often hard to quantify the impact for a coalition. And I think we often struggle with that as professionals, especially in this space, where we have a hard time highlighting the value proposition. And so again, I think the more we can connect it back to the broader organization, mission, and context, and also highlight things to like what the mutual benefits would be, I think the better off we'll get more support from the organization. Okay. So the role of the organizer, it's important to not get involved with internal politics. It's important to consider and reflect on who hired you, who brought you in, who makes the decisions, who do you report to, what is the overall context in which we're operating this coalition, what are the self-interests that exist between members, and who's contributing and who's gaining, where's the funding coming from, who's being included and excluded. So it's important as the organizer to consider the framing of the coalition that you're building in the context of the local environment that it's going to be implemented in. So who like, what are the self-interests between members? Who do we want to be included and why? And who's contributing, who's gaining from participating? It's important to like think about the framing of organizing this in the local context in which you're trying to implement it. So before we go into recruiting, I would love to just pulse the group and understand if someone could share, and I know we heard a little bit in the beginning about some experiences, a coalition that you've put together and how you thought about the organizer's role in the process and how that manifested when the coalition was off the ground. So would anyone like to share about a coalition that they've kind of put together, and also how it was linked back to the organization, broader mission, and how you thought about your role in it.
This is Kim Freeman. I can share a little bit. And this was with when I told you I worked with a local health department for several years. And so we had several grants that I was instrumental in writing, federal, state, and local. And I can remember some of the federal grants where they would already have the topic pretty much identified, but the grants would be, I guess, distributed across the states. You would have to, what do I want to say? Apply for the grants. And so if you will receive the grant, let's just say one of them was related to chronic disease prevention. And so maybe one of the activities had to be building some type of not only a coalition, but you had to do a needs assessment. Let's say it was as one of the activities. And so just bringing everyone together, again, with it being a public health department, obviously health promotion, disease prevention was a major piece of that, but bringing everyone together was, it was a challenge in some cases, but it came easy in other cases, just depending on, the areas that you would have to target. And a lot of times we're addressing health disparities. And so you would have to identify different areas based off of the needs assessment results. I was listening to one of the things that you were saying about just the temporary or permanent. And in most cases, with the grants that were received, they weren't designed to be permanent. Once everything was together, but you wanted to make sure that the organizations that were a part of it, that the mission or the activities that were a part or that came about as part of the grant were sustainable. And I think that was the area where it began to be a little challenging. Now I can say when Ohio went smoke-free, we had huge statewide coalitions. And then afterwards, they were kind of split. And so there were some things that were continuing in, in the local different counties. But that was another example of one that, once that big activity or the mission was accomplished, then some things kind of settled down a little bit and it looked a little bit different across the board, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kimberly. That's a some great examples. And also it is great. I didn't even realize federal grants were provided for for doing things like this. So that's a really great learning. But I appreciate that it's what for like the smoke free. That was another example that I have here too. Like that was a huge thing in many states where we had to like there was massive groups of people involved in getting the word out there. And also, there was a lot of opposition and people had different opinions too. Like, it was an interesting issue, certainly. And I do think on the permanent or temporary, I saw you were coming off mute. Just one note on the temporary or permanent thing. I often think that we have to consider the time bound nature of the coalition, and if we want it to be forever or if we're trying to achieve some type of goal at the end. I think that the difference being that if it's a goal to be achieved or some type of objective in the end, that might be more temporary in nature, whereas if it's more of an awareness or more of a powerhouse of individuals who are passionate about a particular issue, that may actually be more of a permanent structure where you are having this manifest for longer and you are continuing to build and grow the coalition over time. And with students, in the context of like a university setting or in a high school, the students are funneling through, and then in 4 years or 5 years they're moving on. So you have a constant cycle of people coming in and out of the coalition. But if you have a strong base, then it will continue to live on in perpetuity, which I think is also kind of a cool thing. So just super interesting. Kim, were you going to share anything else on that? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm fine. I was going to agree with one of your statements, so that was fine. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Thank you for sharing as well. I really appreciate that. Any other thoughts from folks? Okay. Callista, I know you had mentioned, not to call you off, but you talked about some wellness programs for employees. I'm curious to learn about that as well.
Sure. So we have chronic disease programs that focus on diabetes and hypertension. And then also having programs that are specifically for mental health. So your stress management, mindfulness, self-care. And we have so many programs. Sorry, I'm just thinking through. Also, we have biometric screenings that are every year, so employees can get their cholesterol, glucose, and blood pressure checked. So putting together a program just so they're informed on what is all included in the biometric screening and when it will also be held at their school, because these are on-site events. During flu season, we pretty much do the same thing. So we have a company that comes out to the school to give flu shots for employees specifically.
Great. Okay, so yours is more, I love it's more targeted in terms of your you're addressing like these things point in time. It's like you have, and then you have likely a group of people or everyone then is able to participate because it's more targeted, right?
Right. So like on a quarterly basis, we have certain things that we want to meet our pretty much meet each month, each quarter, I'm sorry.
Cool. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, let's, I know we're about an hour in. Let's take about a 10-minute break or so. We'll come back and we'll go through some recruiting as well, strategies. So let's come back at 40 after the hour, please. And we'll see you all shortly. So with recruiting for coalitions, we all know that that organizations would be stronger if they are able to find volunteers. And in the context of a coalition, volunteers are often crucial to ensuring they are successful. And truly, we often have to ask volunteers, and volunteers could be in the form of people doing it for free, but it also can be in the form of asking somebody, within your organization, or asking, if like with the grant, you could even perhaps have some type of folks, involved in the overall process for the coalition. And I know one of the things that we had talked about when folks were going around in the intros is the concept of engagement with an online, with social media, and how we can build a coalition in this virtual environment. And we'll talk through some strategies a bit later, but just from a high level perspective, we have to appeal to people's self-interest. We have to explain the personal, professional power, morale that individuals will gain through their participation, like process. And again, you have to recruit people to activities and provide ways for them to engage, rather than it just being a business meeting, or rather than just pushing information to them. And you also have to have some type of entry-level program or some type of onboarding program or training for new people, because in the absence of that, then you won't have members who know what they're doing, and they won't understand what you're trying to achieve unless you have some type of onboarding process and program in place. And then you also have to provide opportunities for people to develop their own skills. Like I mentioned, you could have leaders being able to emerge from within the group. You can like have people maybe gain experience with fundraising, or they may gain experience even with recruiting. But again, like, you have to be able to showcase how members are able to develop skills through their participation as well. So it's not just like one-sided, you're getting something from them, but they're also gaining something through their participation as well. So it's mutually beneficial to the coalition, and also the individuals who are participating. Otherwise, you really won't be able to get a solid group of participants if there's nothing for them to learn and gain by their participation. And networking is always like a great asset. And I think the more you're able to create spaces and opportunities for people to share and to explain their background and their experience and how that may translate to what you're trying to do, you will have just greater strength in numbers. For the image as a recruiter, you need to come off as professional. You want to portray the image that you're that you're trying to recruit. It's important that they also see you as someone that is similar to them as well. People also shouldn't be able to remember what you looked like per se, but you need to appeal to the audience in which you're going out to. And that includes being precise and concise, enthusiastic, upbeat, and conveying a really, really clear message. And meeting people where they are as well is super important. And we'll talk about that as we transition to the social media portion. You have to be prepared. You have to legitimize yourself. And what I mean by that is you have to like almost have a following of sorts. You have to convey yourself in a way that you're building followership, even if people don't know you personally. Within the community, your work and your experiences, if you're leading a coalition, really need to be built on a strong foundation of your work and how you show up in these contexts. It's important to listen. It's important to agitate and to like take in as much information as possible, and to then disseminate it in a way that will continue to build a strong coalition and get a commitment from people up front. It's important to get their buy-in and commitment so that when things may be busy, or when there's an event or something, or if there's like some type of thing you're trying to put on, that you would have a shared commitment from the people who are participating. And then it's important to follow up. Often what happens is with recruitment, we may make an initial contact with somebody and then fail to follow up with them, or they fail to respond even if we do an initial follow-up. So it's important to regularly follow up and check in with people as well to ensure that they are staying engaged and that you're regularly reaching out. For some tips, if these are just some ideas that I had, it's important to stay organized in when you're assigning the tasks so that people have a clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities. Providing coffee is always a great way, or like even snacks or giveaway items, celebrating birthdays, toasting the small victories, really just trying to celebrate the membership and keep people like engaged. I heard yesterday that one of the one of the key reasons why, you know, like a meeting, there was, this is like an example from a school, I think it was in LA County. They were trying to get and foster greater parent involvement in their child's education experience. And what the school did is they offered a free dinner to parents to participate in these workshops like every week. And just bringing food was a way to like attract people to go and participate in learning about strategies for how to get more involved in their child's education. So like that group of parents, then you could think about that as the perspective of a coalition, is now really bought into trying to better themselves as parents and how they can become more engaged in the educational process. And then, but there was just that little incentive that people needed to show up, which I think is really, could be really powerful. And I know, like, frankly, at Google, we're trying to incentivize people to return to the office by saying, oh, look, we have all, all the, like, these free food, we have the on-site amenities, the transportation to work. We're trying to incentivize people to come back with kind of some of these intangibles, which I think is always really interesting. And then it's important to maintain office hours or some type of time for people to be able to reach out at different times of the day as well, to create time and space for this. So it's really the lifeblood, and it's thriving organizations have to train their staff and leaders on how to recruit others and build recruitment strategies into ongoing work. Again, everyone that you are in contact with essentially needs to serve as the role of a recruiter in building the coalition. It's not just you alone in all this. It's really ensuring that recruitment remains at the forefront of what you're trying to bring to life. And the leadership team, your staff, colleagues and peers that you work with, even students can become recruiters and to help build a strong coalition. So I think it's important for us to, as we're onboarding new volunteers and new members, to provide a platform and a way for how other people can get involved. I think that's often what is lacking from a coalition that continues to be time-bound in nature, is ensuring that we're building the recruitment strategies into ongoing programmatic work. So shifting gears a little bit toward putting coalitions into practice. So again, we've talked about the concept of working with diverse stakeholders across the community in order to foster shared understanding that increases alcohol, other drugs, and violence prevention efforts, or again, it could span the spectrum, mental health, well-being. The focus is on the basic theories and tools to community organizing and stakeholder relationship development, which we'll discuss here in this next portion. And then it's important to then have organized opportunities for stakeholder and community involvement. This is where we go from the idea phase of we've identified the target area or topic that we're going to have in practice, to then actually start organizing opportunities for involvement. And I think that's the key piece of moving from just passive members to people who are engaged and are serving then as change agents for the work that we're trying to do. So we'll look at Robert Quinn's model of the 4 different change strategies. So we have the first level here on the bottom, which is just telling the strategy. So we have a rational persuasion or emphasizing the facts. Level 2 is moving us to starting to force the strategy. So we're providing behavior and emphasis on authority. We have then participating strategy, which is an open dialogue where you're emphasizing the relationship. And then you have the 4th level, which is the transformational strategy. This is where it's really transcending oneself, and it's emphasis on the emergent reality. And so you move through the series of changes, and you have to again consider what it on this change strategy, what are we trying to achieve through the coalition? Are we doing this as something we're just trying to force information, we're trying to persuade people, or are we really trying to create an open dialogue and emphasizing relationships? Or is this something that's even greater than ourselves, that it transcends anything in the current context that we know about, and we're emphasizing emergent realities or new trends of things that are coming up? So it's important to consider where we're at on the change spectrum in a way to then inform how we'll approach the coalition and start to build a membership base. So there's for a community organized, like a community organized event, there's different environmental changes where coalition leaders and members need to think broadly about the collaborating interests and recognizing the needs and concerns of other people. So people may be at different stages of their own personal understanding and view of what you're trying to convey. And all the strategies are viable based on the situation that's appropriate and the objective that we're trying to achieve. So it's not saying one is better or worse than the other. It's simply saying we need to meet people where they are and understand where they fall into the spectrum. So informed deliberation is where stakeholders are educated around data and perspectives about a problem. The perspective sharing broadens understanding for stakeholders, and people that are able to participate in collaborative problem solving with a new understanding of the issues. And so with informed deliberation, the context that I think about the work that you all do is around how we just provide more data and information and perspective about a problem or issue that like society is facing or that people are struggling with. And with informed deliberation, we're able to then present the facts, the objective facts, like with vaping, for example, the long-term health not benefits, the long-term health concerns that are raised with this epidemic that's happening with so many young kids vaping at such a young age, how they're getting access to it, the data, what does that mean long-term for their health if they're doing it. So like there's so many ways to consider presenting this information in a way that just is informing people. It's not judging them for doing it. It's not trying to create a polarizing environment. Rather, it's presenting data and facts to then welcome and allow for problem solving with a new or refined understanding of issues. So a community forum is often a great way to shed light on a particular issue. So it often involves an open group of stakeholders from an arena or from a different parts coming together around a specific issue. And it creates an opportunity for shared discussion around issues or needs. It also enables multiple perspectives to be shared and a community-wide knowledge of issues, the tensions, the trade-offs, what people are facing and going through, and also some next steps for how to navigate what is ahead. And the reason why I brought this community forum concept up is because I've seen community forums where in person they are great. I think like you could bring hundreds of people together and you are discussing about a specific issue or you're trying to shed light on an issue, or you're trying to understand perspectives from other people. What I've also seen this is done extremely well is with discussions on various platforms online. So I've seen this, on Facebook and community groups where people are discussing and sharing information with one another. I'll talk some specific examples as well. I think this is next. Is there there's this concept of a resident roundtable project. I was reading about a group of residents that came together to essentially within a community development where they were trying to put in some new amenities and also prevent people from having loud noise after a certain time period. So what happened is this community brought together all of the residents, and it wasn't part of like a formalized HOA group where there's like a homeowners association. It was just a group of residents within like I think it was in like some type of neighborhood or some type of planned development. But everyone came together and they discussed about ways to like have longer term, like not policy, but maybe more guidelines about, being neighborly and conduct after hours and, things that they can do to enhance the community. And so I thought this is a great example where, and this was all done like over a Facebook group. It was not like people didn't even come together in person. It was a few of the residents had an idea or they had a concern from what they were experiencing as residents. And then they essentially created this form for people to be able to go in and talk about the issues and then also agree on some level of how to move forward. And I just thought it was a great message, and that all of us can play this coalition building role for like anything, even in our own lives personally, but also around the work that we do every day, to get a community of practice of sorts together to share and build knowledge and to connect with people. I think that's a really, really cool thing. The other thing is the bar walk. This was where in neighborhoods and tailgates where there would be local, and I've seen this also on college campuses, where you have buddies or people who would help to ensure that you got home safely from the bar, or from like an event or a party or something. And I've also seen this done, I think, at college campuses, where you have people that are essentially volunteers that are helping students get home safely from an event of some sort. I think this is like really a practical experience of like, we have to recognize people and try to help them where they are, and to build awareness and the importance of caring for others and showing up in the times where we really need them, where like really need support, can be really powerful. And then I've also when I was a student, actually, I was part of our the student government team, and the college campus that I was on was proposing to go to a full smoke-free campus where you couldn't smoke anywhere near building entrances. And so what we did was we hosted a community forum. We brought together the faculty senate, and we brought together the student health services office, and we brought together the facilities and maintenance team, and we brought in community members, both from the local community, but also people who are residents on campus, and also people from the surrounding area, and also like local business owners, etc. Because truly something like this would have a large impact on the community. So we hosted a community forum where we were able to present the facts, the data, both sides of the story, and also gain input from and concerns from the folks who were attending the session. And this helped to gain awareness for the topic, but also start to move toward making recommendations for whether or not we should move toward a smoke-free campus. And so it was a really, really cool exercise. And I think this is a partnership that we had, and it was really led from the Student Health Service office, which I thought was fantastic, where they had approached members of our student government to say, hey, could we co-collaborate on this this community forum? And I just thought that was a really great way to gain followership, and but also to like bring awareness to this issue that is quite, could be quite contentious for people who like may have a difference of opinion about it. But again, I thought these were some examples from the field that I've seen. I'm curious if anyone else has seen this done or something similar, where you had a community forum. Both, it could be a virtual forum or where it was a live event. I'm curious if anyone has either participated themselves or helped to like put one of these on.
So we have a community advisory board in Gwinnett, and we're trying to get one for Newton and Rockdale in Georgia as well too. And we just have people in different walks of life. We have teachers, we have students, we have different organizations, not particularly all for HIV or STD, but just various organizations, and we hear from people in the community and what they would like to see, what they haven't seen and why, how they would like things advertised, why they don't get certain services. So yeah, we have that about every quarter to meet with members in the community, and then we're starting one for 2 other counties.
That's fantastic. And I think I saw you were coming off mute as well.
Yes, when the marijuana became first, when it was just medical, and then when you were allowed to have small quantities in Massachusetts, we had a forum in conjunction with student government to have a conversation about it and let people know what our rules and regulations would be as a state institution. So it was a similar kind of thing.
Fantastic. I love it. I think these are great opportunities to engage with the community at large. Great. Okay, let's move on here. So just some for folks who don't have as much experience with either putting these on or planning, some great tips is to really establish a core planning team and to pull together the representative stakeholders, like as Anne had shared. It's important to pull together various individuals from different parts of the broader ecosystem to then be able to put this event on. We have to also talk about the goals for the forum and the process that supports the goals. So how could we ensure that we're structuring the discussion such that we're like hitting the goal that we want, but also it's broad and inclusive enough that we're capturing all aspects of the issue. This is where it requires a very wide range of people involved in the process. And then it's important to then solicit stakeholders that have these perspectives that could bring in, and then talk about the process for the forum, the outcomes, and then the next steps to bring about some progress following the forum. It's super important to talk about the outcomes from an objective perspective, and then also ensuring that there's a clear, actionable next steps for the issue that was discussed. Otherwise, it can kind of not become a waste of time, but it can become a just not as effective in terms of being able to convey what the message that is trying to be shared with others. Again, the outcomes cannot be dictated by the agenda. It's the goal is to not convince the community. It's rather just to bring together everyone to discuss discuss the matter at hand. Again, it's to bring awareness to the tensions, the trade-off, and perspectives. And the outcome is really meant to provide a collective insight into the issue. So how the messages are framed, they need to be deliberate, and it requires careful and thoughtful framing. Again, we talked about this earlier, data, what we know to be true about the particular issue, and it needs to be encompassing perspectives. Why does it feel, and what does it feel like living in this reality? Why are we here, and what can we gain from the experience? So ensuring that we're thoughtful in the framing of how we approach the form is also super critical, and it needs to be considered upfront. Again, the post-form follow-up should be a public record of the progress. So reporting back on the discussion, it's important that we are letting people hear their voice in reports. So ensuring that someone is there capturing what people are saying so the concerns are documented. It's important to point out the tensions and trade-offs, and to establish a common ground and capture the energy toward creating a viable solution, and then articulating next steps as public record. So this is where we're shifting from, like, after the forum happens, to how we're conveying the discussion and then making progress toward the next steps. Forms may not be the best choice for media inclusion. What I mean by this is that people may not feel safe participating if members of the local newspaper or media team are present, without the tensions becoming without the dissent becoming like some massive headline, or so just consider that. I know we don't want to limit, of course, people being there, but it could create an environment where people are not comfortable sharing their opinions, and so we just need to be mindful of that. And then the post-form reports or implementation activities are typically better for media and community members, where they can talk to, after you've controlled kind of the initial narrative in some regard, you can then then have a discussion with the media post-form, what I think is usually a little bit better. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put you into breakout groups, and we're going to actually create a form. So I want this to be, again, relevant to your work. And we heard the marijuana example, but I would love to build a forum. So what we'll do is I'll put everyone into groups, and then I will post this in the chat. But if you can just work together for 10 minutes or so to come up with a form around an issue to serve as the topic, the stakeholders, data that you may look at, the frame, outcomes, and then just a high-level agenda for the discussion. I'm hoping you can do this around something that is very topical to you. And then we will have people share out what they discuss in their group. So let me just see if I can do the breakouts. Let's see here. Okay. So I'm going to create. Okay. So I'm going to send everyone off to a breakout, and then I'll bring everyone back after 10 minutes. And I will post this in the chat so you can all see what we're discussing about. So you should have an invitation to join a breakout. relevant and certainly relevant and controversial. I agree, and I think you have the right stakeholders there to represent the various viewpoints, and so I think this is great. Any other group would like to share, or let's? I mean, I would like everyone to share. This is so if we could have another group share, that'd be great. Thank you for sharing this.
I can go next. This is Brittany and my group. Our topic that we focused on was youth vaping, and we really felt like it was important to have as our key holders schools, after school programs, sports programs, parents, environmental health professionals, but also including, of course, our students, like middle schoolers and high school students. The data that we thought would be important to share would be any of the youth tobacco survey data, behavioral risk factor survey data around how many people are currently smoking, and any FDA data. And we really, when we thought through how to frame our messaging, we knew that it was going to be important to focus on those long-term impacts of vaping on youth and their brain development. And for our forum outcomes, really focus on, at the end of that forum, there'd be awareness around youth vaping and really lead to our key stakeholders working on policy change around smoking and vape-free environments. And then an agenda that we created around that outcome was really starting off with sharing the key data, sharing how this work is important to our key stakeholders, especially those who may not be specifically focused on vaping and smoking, and then sharing ways that they can help raise awareness and be a part of policy change.
That's fantastic. Great, thank you. This is super helpful. Have you done anything like this?
I think there's a few of us who were kind of sitting on different meetings related to tobacco work or working with youth. But I don't think there was any of us who were leading such a coalition. But anybody from my group, feel free to hop in and share anything you were doing around that.
And I guess maybe asked differently, would this be something you would do? I think it's a great idea.
I definitely think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that and just say that, of course, I work a lot with youth vaping, and of course, with these things, these are the ways, I guess, the way that we internally look at how we want to inform the community a lot more, because once again, there's so much that's so much. There's so little known about it that it kind of has to start with presenting what we do know, and then inform about based off how cigarettes and combustibles went. There's a strong chance that this will lead in the same way, and also just knowing about the harmful effects of nicotine and the addiction that it causes in any capacity in which it's consumed.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. I think this is could be a great framework to bring it up, because I there is the coolness factor of it, but then also there's the pressure, I think, that young youth are getting to do it and to be brought into this cycle. So this is, to me, it would be great. It would be great to have kids up there as well, sharing why they're doing it, how they got involved with it, and again, how parents can talk about this at home with their kids. Like if they find the vape pen, how do they bring it up with them? Like how can they have a conversation about it? And this is fantastic. Okay, great. Next group. We had
Go next.
Yeah. Okay, great. Kim, yeah.
This is Kim, and in my group, it was Ann, Jan, Julie, and I think Adizatu. Um, this was actual kind of a real life, I guess, experience and that Jan is working on, looking at youth in that have loved ones that are in recovery or living with addiction. And so that was the, I guess, the target when we're looking at stakeholders. Currently, he's working within a school, so school administrators, nurses, teachers, coaches in that space, even counselors. But we also talked about maybe involving faith-based organizations. We talked about family success centers or treatment centers, recovery departments. And looking at an agenda, just thinking about maybe an overview or goal of the program, talking about the topics. Jan mentioned that they have looked at self-care as well as safe people and places. And then the data was looking at how many people is this really impacting, how many students are really being impacted, the impact on the adolescents at home. And then I know Mitch joined in at one point and we talked about people sharing like a personal story of someone that is going through addiction or recovery. And then just thinking of outcomes, maybe a decrease in addiction for those loved ones, or even just an awareness of family support and resources. And team, jump in if I missed something.
Yeah. So Jan, and you said this is from a real life experience. So have you done this, or are you planning to do this? Or
We were supposed to get it off the ground starting April 2020, but you know, with the pandemic, everything screwed it up. We were actually working with some government agencies where their counselors worked with these targeted youth, and those counselors were supposed to bring the youth to this program. However, once things shifted virtually, the turnout didn't turn out to be as great as we wanted. We were able to run one round, which had 3 participants. And after that, this past year, actually, I've been trying to partner with different schools to get this program up and running because the government agencies that we were supposed to partner with, they were just still so busy, so they didn't have the capacity to provide help us recruit with their youth. So they were still working at home, really. And that's where where I experienced a lot of issues trying to do recruitment through these different schools. Like there was a lot of buy-in from the nurses, the counselors, but there was little reception when it came to the actual youth. So that was one of the frustrating parts of yeah, this program that I've been trying to get off the ground.
yeah, that's a great thank you for sharing that. I can understand how it would be difficult to engage with it, particularly, and I think this is probably true for all these topics, engaging in a virtual environment, especially when we're working with youth and adolescent age. It is a lot harder to have a engagement that is where people can still participate and like gain something from the session. So I think in our next session, I want to talk more about how we can foster engagement in a virtual way, and how we can still have these discussions in a way that we are having engagement. It's tough. It's a tough problem. I totally understand, and this totally resonates probably with everyone here, in that it has made things so much harder to have these type of discussions and to do it virtually. But what I think is reassuring is that we have to figure out how to do it, because more and more things are being delivered in this way, where, I mean, like, look at all of us here, we're all from different places all over, and we are coming together on this forum. We've never met, and we're all sharing with each other, which I think is wonderful. It's just, how do we get this and activate it with a younger audience, and how do we make sure we keep it engaging and that people show up, right? So let's continue this discussion. I appreciate you sharing that. I think this is a fantastic idea as well. And then anyone from our last group, we have just in our closing 10 minutes here, I'd love to hear about that, and then we'll close out, and then we'll be on our way. I think it was Bethany, Heather, Martin, Nicole.
Oh, we actually we were the first group that spoke.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we kind of went out of order there.
My
I think
bad.
we were actually group 4.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Who hasn't gone? Which group hasn't gone? Alana, did your group go? Or Erica? Okay. Well, maybe maybe we're done for today. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to get some closing thoughts here, and then we'll come back together again next week. I just want to say I appreciate everyone sharing these ideas and thoughts about a potential coalition / how we would bring together the community in some type of forum. So I appreciate the ideas that you all shared, and also the challenges that we're all facing in the context of how we're working and how we're all operating today. So we didn't get to talk too much about the social media engagement portion, which I will start off with in our next session. Just how we can foster this engagement. I'm going to think a little bit more on how we can activate the youth in these type of modalities for how we're engaging. And I also will provide a template for you to start to come up with a social media strategy. And I do want to try to find again more on the youth part, not to over focus on it, but I think it's important for us to address in the next session, given that it's such a timely, very timely topic, and I think would benefit all of us here. So I just want to say thank you so much for the engagement again, and I'm looking forward to next week. I'm going to wrap us a little bit early, just so you have time between meetings to use the restroom or get something to eat. But again, thank you. I'm looking forward to next week, and I will see you all at the same time. So, and Jennifer, is there anything we need to do to close out, or?
No, I mean, just everybody, the second part of this is at the same time next week, Friday. If you have any questions about certificates or anything, let me know. And there should be an email for an evaluation of this presentation as well as the next one. But otherwise, thank you, Mitch. It was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, please do give feedback. I'd love, I love, we're constantly trying to make these better and relevant for you all. So I really appreciate the feedback, and definitely take that into consideration. So thank you. And thanks, Jennifer and team, for putting this on. Really appreciate it. I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.